The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil. For thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. What's happening? Benton here. Saturday morning, live from a 2012 Nissan Versa parked on the streets of Los Angeles. Shout out to the chat, shout out to the replay crew. I woke up early, um, had a visceral reaction. It was about 1:30 in the morning, I think it was. Sort of jolted awake. Irrational fears, briefly, right? They say, what do you mean fear? Yeah, just, just a quick thought of, oh my goodness, what must be done? What danger could I possibly be in, right? Look out, look out, look out. Whatever that is, but, not quite a full fight or flight response. But quickly I remembered, oh, that's right. It's moving day, uh, where my vehicle was parked uh, as of midnight was not parked legally. Although I knew from experience nobody would be around to write tickets or tow until probably 5 or 6 a.m. There's a some sort of festival in the park. Um, the car fired right up, which is good. Although I got up on the freeway to keep the battery charged. I wanted to make sure to drive far enough to have at least, as much charge or possibly more, right? The car's been sitting for a few weeks. Charge the old battery up. I hit something on the freeway. Uh, Not sure what that was. Saw nothing, but when I got parked, there was some damage, to the plastic cladding underneath the car. Probably just, do what I've done in the past with other cars, reach down there and just, rip all that bullshit out, right? Or the affected part anyway. So only a little harm, no foul, right? No foul. Although I did have the thought for some reason of potentially running something over on the highway. It's interesting how the mind works with respect to potential calamities and catastrophes, and then back to what I've talked about with this true knowledge of self, achievement unlocked, and what I am being unable to fear or even to conceptualize uh, potential catastrophes. And I've talked about, um, in fact, it's within this vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions that the individual learns all of this, learns how to be fearful, learns how to conceptualize catastrophe, learns how to worry or um, be anxious. My morning's been mostly calm. And if folks aren't aware, the undiagnosed fake autism, sometimes that, lends itself to getting into a routine, and then it can be somewhat stressful to see the routine altered. Um, so, all things considered, uh, it's a chill morning. And I'm off the coffee finally. I think this is either day 2 or day 3, no coffee. And I love coffee. However, I've found I think I'm just more sensitive to coffee for whatever reason in certain ways. When I'm addicted to it, I can drink it, you know, much of the day as long as I cut it off early enough to be able to get a good night's sleep. Reminds me of my father complaining about his quality and lack of sleep for many, many years. And he drinks Folgers coffee all day long, more or less up until bedtime. It's like, hey, you might try just no coffee after, I don't know, noon. But maybe that's his routine. I suppose that's his routine. So there's your part of your Benton update. And the thing about this parking, because they put up temporary placards that says, no parking Saturday and Sunday, no stopping, tow away zone. Nobody's parked where am currently, although there's a wrecked vehicle that was blocking the bus stop, and I guess somebody dragged it to a legal parking spot, and nobody's parked behind. I parked behind it, and then there's nobody behind me for quite a while, but it's early. What I've noticed about LA, people do seem to get going kind of late in the mornings compared to what I'm used to, even in other big cities. Maybe some of that is arriving fashionably late, a culture of arriving fashionably late, perhaps. And we will get into some topics. I don't have a topic, and I did not have a stream title. That's why the stream title is "The Topic Is dot dot dot." Um, Yet to be determined. Yet to be determined. So, um, pardon me. So tonight and tomorrow night, and then we get to move the car back to hopefully some shade. That's the drawback to this is the I'm assuming I'm going to be in the direct sun. My brain just doesn't really work well enough in trying to predict, where the shade is going to be at a certain period of time. So I suspect that's why the folks are parked quite a ways behind where I'm at. There must be some shade back there. So I'm almost certain the sun will be beating down on us, but that's okay. We'll be all right. Shout out to the chat. I see Rick down there. As is my recent custom, I won't be reading the chat for a while. I thought yesterday's stream went pretty well. I certainly had more I could have pontificated and talked about, but it felt like a good moment. It felt like a good moment to end the stream. I noticed when I was doing the Nightmare Dystopia podcast, um, and actually my dating and relationships podcast many many years ago. I can always tell when to end the thing for some reason. I could just okay, this is the moment, right? In the stream, in the podcast. Why ever that is. But yes, give me a moment. I will be entertaining uh, upon request. And that's another thing about going live. I assume I have things to talk about and a desire to talk. And in this case, just there's nothing going on. There's nothing to go and do right now. And again, sort of out of my normal routine. Well, back to waking up at 1:30, I believe it was 1:30 a.m. and just calmly laid for about an hour and a half till about 3 a.m. and relaxed and chilling and just thinking, um, you know, feeling the enjoyment of the lack of tension and stress in the tissues, right? And how many of us are relaxed to that point? I know the old me was not, and certainly there's aches and pains and it's not perfect, but overall the healing certainly continues. The act of healing, um, Jesus is healing me certainly at the risk of offending the listener, right? Imagine being offended. Of course, it makes sense in this vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions that and not this audience, I mean, but just generally that folks would, you know, find offense in that. Um, Reminds me, yesterday I was washing my hands and rinsing out my eyeballs, and the cops were, it was in the mornings, the cops were out there trying to figure out who to tow, or are these people going to come move these vehicles? Because yesterday was a different area where the people had to move their cars. I saw at least one car got towed, maybe two. And there's some people there trying to jump some of these vehicles that have been parked. And if people aren't aware of big city parking, a lot of the parking spaces, it's 2 hour parking. It's not 24 hours a day, 7 days a week parking in most areas. So um, the few areas that are 24/7 tend to be coveted, right? So that's how that breaks down. So people that don't have anywhere to store their vehicles, maybe they can leave it parked on the street, but at some point the signs are going up to say, "Hey, man, got to move it on out of here, at least for a week or a day or a few days." And I can't say that I'm looking forward to the running out of money. That really ought to be the topic. And I'm not hitting up you fine folks for donations, although if folks want to, they're certainly able, and it's welcome. I don't know how much e-begging I'll be doing until I run out of money, right? Just like I, was like, yeah, I don't really want to be sleeping in my car on the street. And I've been sleeping in my car on the street for, I don't know. I'm bad with time, so I don't know, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, um, whatever that amount of time is. So I guess I won't really know until I get there. No fears around it. In the past, I know I've had a lot of trepidation and just anxiety and worries in general. And I am a bit of a micromanager when it comes to my own affairs. And that was another thing, sort of observing this process of, and it's a whole thing because the windows are covered up for the most part. I've taken to leaving one of the front passenger window uncovered just in case, especially with all of the things that have been going on, with the ice we can always talk about all of that stuff. I'm sure if I have nothing to talk about, we can always read some news articles, but a few of them have caught my attention. But the point I'm making, with all the ice stuff going on, and man, it's, not that I never got a dirty look, but it's at least once or twice a day. It's just an overt dirty look to Mr. Benton, who does look, to the uninitiated or the untrained eye, I am a little bit of the central casting, in a way, not for what an ICE agent is, right? More for what I think people, it's like they're looking for, evidence as whoever's in charge of ICE says, we will go anywhere we want to in Los Angeles at any time. So, and for example, something I've noticed is LAPD pays me no mind whatsoever. Um, None. But yesterday I was sitting in the park, sunning my feet, getting the UV rays onto my feet, as I've been doing every day, for at least an hour a day. The UV index has been quite high, and UV has specific qualities that my feet appreciate. I'm trying not to be graphic or mention certain terms that turns off much of the audience, so that's why I'm being cryptic. But I noticed yesterday, now it was a female, so I don't know if that plays into it, but this female kept, LAPD, while they were in their cruiser, she was in the passenger seat, kept looking out the window at me. And I mean, they pay me zero attention, I mean, none whatsoever historically. And so it kind of made me wonder, is she thinking that ICE is posted up in the park, right? It's like, what is this? And then just the lone unmasked ICE agent. Does that make any sense? And it does kind of show how dumb people can be. Although I am reading a lot in, I don't know why she would be, but she did look back. She had to crane her neck to look back at me. Of course, maybe it was just like, hey, look at that, how white those guys' legs are, or whatever. Who knows? Who knows? I can't call it. Now, why did I bring all of that up? Something of out of consideration. Oh, that's why I was leaving the window uncovered. Although in the past, I had somebody at one point, maybe I hadn't been here but a few weeks, when I first started sleeping in my car in LA, I had all of the windows covered, and somebody woke me up at like 1 in the morning, knocking on the door, wanted to ask me questions. I was like, what is this? And I remember I was like super fucking high one time, and like I was getting in the car and like putting the window shade into place. And like as I was doing all of that, like just some random bozo was like almost like I was doing something wrong covering the windows of my car. And I think it was late enough in the day. I was probably about to go to sleep. I just looked at him, just got in my car and shut the door. Like why I want to have a conversation with somebody about covering the windows of my car. Meanwhile, if somebody's walking down the street and sees, wow, this car has its windows covered. Does anybody notice when they walk down the street of a city and there's like a car with the windows are completely blacked out, including the windshield? Like you can't see into the car, even if you put your face to the fucking glass you can't see in. But for some reason that doesn't bother people. It is interesting to see that people are unable to sort of think their way through a problem, because I do understand that knee jerk of, hey, what, that's weird that guy's got his windows covered, but then starting to sort of go down the checklist, the Sherlock Holmes checklist. Same thing with some idea that I might be a government, working for the government or whatever. It's like, to me, okay, whatever's drawing my attention to that, now we need to look to confirm or disconfirm, right? You know, what observances, what energies can I put into thinking my way through this problem? Because if I do manage to get somewhat offended by the notion that I would be, an on the ground government, because historically I'm fairly anti-government, I would say. Yeah, I had my patriotic days to some extent. I got wrapped up in that many years ago, but I'd say it's probably 20 years of having anti-government views and sentiments, not to act upon or not to destroy the government, just a distrust, a knowing the incompetence, knowing that they work for rich folks, understanding the nature of the beast and all of these things. So I'm it's sort of the being around the paranoid meth heads. It's like think I might be a cop, and at a certain point it's like, hey man, I'm being pretty tolerant of all of this paranoia, because I also don't like the police. You do realize, as a homeless person, they also harass me. It's not like they're my buddies and I'm in good with them. Like, I also don't like them for the most part, right? um they have harassed me as a homeless person many times, and now I have to be treated as if I might be the enemy. It's like, what is this? I kind of feel the same about the ICE stuff. It's like, yo, there's zero. If somebody actually pays attention to me, like, there's no fucking conservative Southerners. Maybe some drug addicts. They're not conservatives, but this idea that I'm some symbol of middle America conservatism or whatever. It's like, yo, those people don't. They're not here, man. You know, those people aren't here. And the idea of actually being a government agent, it's like, yo, I'm tested in the 99th percentile by the government, in formalized testing. You know, I would be way too fucking good at it by age 49 to be a street level agent. Like, are you crazy? Maybe I would be in the mobile command center or something. Again, this is even in a thought experiment that I would work for the government in the first place, which I wouldn't, right? Being comfortable with that, and just, there's no way to explain that. And I think what can frustrate the undiagnosed fake autistic people such as myself is, the more higher functioning, the ones who've, allowed themselves to be socialized, or over socialized, right, enough to even become high functioning in the first place. Um, yeah, just I've actually kind of lost my point there, but I don't know that it even needs making. Um, but I do have a difficulty allowing for the general public and their stupidity, right? And there's the hell realm, the delusion, all of these things I've been talking about. Yeah, that's bad enough, and just how evil people are, and they're only interested in themselves, and on and on and on, and their own reputations, pretending to give a fuck, but it's self-serving to avoid losing face. Um, it's that thing when I can tell when I'm walking and somebody in the car is trying to yield to me, but they don't want to, but they're only doing it because, God forbid someone sees them not yield to a pedestrian. And my thing is like, yo, just fucking like just go. Can we avoid the shame spiral of maybe someone is going to see you and actually recognize and have the thought, wow, that's uh that's old Bobby there not yielding to it. Like, who gives a fuck? Nobody cares. It's just hilarious to me, the way people operate. But just the actual stupidity, and this is something I get into in some of my public speaking on the streets here. Although it's been several days since I've done public speaking, maybe I've received enough healing now that I don't feel, the need to go out there and maybe, dig up some more repression, some more emotion, repressed emotion seeking its exit. But um, it's the idea that a lot of people have the notion of the people are going to rise up and when things get bad enough and force change and all of this, and it's like, yeah, but somebody has to actually enact the change. So let's just assume that the government could be sort of convinced or cajoled or however made to sort of relent and back off, and the government could say, okay, we're now going to allow the people, right, the people, the power to sort of change and reform society. These people lack they lack the capacity. They're, unfortunately, most of the individual most your average person that's just walking around is not very it's just, and I need to calm down because this does bother me. They just don't have a lot going on, with the with itness, being with it, an ability to, in the moment, sort of focus in, perform a task when necessary, right? Um, so, as much as I'm wandering around lost in thought, deep in thought, and all of this, yeah, when I need to, I can absolutely sort of snap out of it, focus in, and do a job, perform a task. I don't believe that's the case with the general public. So where I'm at is, the people are dependent, I would say, um, the people, right? The masses of people, sadly, are dependent on these various systems as operated by the government and all of these various entities, the state, right? Benito Mussolini's state. Um, in my view, because if the state, sort of took its hands off the wheel, who's going to, because, when I talk about people being out of it and not with it, yeah, but they're with it enough to operate the existing systems to some extent. And a lot of those systems, as we know, are automated or, semi-automated and all of these things. But to sideline the machinery of the system or parts of the machinery, now we're talking about building new systems. We're talking about creating new systems. And then we're talking about human beings who would be expected to learn, the ins and the outs and the rules of these new systems. And I'm here to tell you, they don't have it in them. The competency, right? The focus, the attention span, just the ability to listen to another person who's also not of authority. Remember, it's the authoritarian system, right? It's the strong, It's the idea of a, and it is Big Brother from 1984. It's this idea of a strong authority, um, that's sort of behind the operation of government, the state and all of these things. So to sideline all of that and then say, yeah, we're going to have some ad hoc grassroots, version of just the collective, right? Almost like a version of Rainbow Family, if anybody's familiar with these people that have these rainbow gatherings. And if I've never been to one, but I've certainly been around a lot of rainbow folks. If folks aren't aware, here's how decisions are made. They have a big meeting and everything's done by consensus, meaning if everybody doesn't agree, the shit don't happen. And at a certain point, there's like a talking stick or whatever. And if you ain't got the talking stick, you got to shut the fuck up, right? Not you, the listener, but and everybody gets their say. Everybody gets to put their 2 cents in. And this is something I recognized early on with this idea of, especially back during the fake pandemic, this idea, and even before that, the idea of a collapse of society and you know, again, the so-called truth community seemingly skewing a little more traditional family values, Christian, whatever that means, mom, apple pie, American exceptionalism, patriotic, and all of these things. Just, not leftist communists, I guess would be the way to put it in the common, you know, as things are now. But, I noticed pretty early on that they think a lot of these people are talking as if, oh, they can just wait till the shit hits the fan and just everybody pick a patch of dirt somewhere, right? And just figure it the fuck out. Oh, communal living. And well, I had already had all of these experiences, in my traveling backpacking days of quasi communal settings. And I said the last thing that these so-called truth community, these people who skew a little more right, they skew a little more order follower. And again, I'm not trying to insult the audience. It's just they skew a little more that way collectively. There's no version of them, let's say there's 50 people in the tribe or whatever. There's no version of these people psychologically sitting around a circle of 50 people and everybody gets to have their say, which means the person out of 50 people, there's going to be one, two, three, four, five people that, I just can't fucking stand. This is how human beings operate. There's always a person or two that just, you can't fucking stand them. So part of communal living in small groups of people or smaller groups, 50, 100 or whatever is you're up close and personal with somebody you can't fucking, not you, is to be up close and personal with at least a smattering of folks that I can't fucking stand the cut of their jib, and I'm treating them like they're equal to me. In fact, they are equal to me. They have exactly equal vote. They have now, sure, maybe with my leadership abilities and over time, I would probably garner some version of influence and all these things. But guess what? So might they, right? So what I realized about these MAGA types is, and the more truth community types is, they're not capable. There's no version of this. It's never going to happen. Just they're not going to be able to sit there and stifle the. Imagine a toilet bowl Earth, if anybody knows who this is. Sitting there, talking stick be damned. If a key phrase or two is uttered, he's piping up, right? you know you just imagine the cacophony of intransigence while the one person is like, hey, I've got the stick, why are y'all talking, right? But somehow these degenerate societal dropout hippie fucking on the fringes of society rainbow family, somehow they can shut the fuck up and sit in a circle, right? And patiently and calmly, however long it takes, we're hashing this out. And any issue that gets brought up is going to be addressed. And it's not going to be dismissed out of hand, right? Like the order follower types under strong authority. It's easy for old Benton, expert in detecting the weak point of systems, right? It's easy for old Benton to pipe up and say, hey, man, I understand that this doesn't feel like it's going to be a problem in the future, but, old Benton here has expertly identified something it's not a problem today. It's going to be a problem in 3 days. And in 3 days, it's going to be a complete fucking shit show panic. So how about we address it now? Well, that's just dismissed out of hand because it doesn't feel like it's going to be a problem. And, especially under order following and strong authority, well, that's not in the fucking plans. It's nowhere in the procedures and the how we operate does it say anything about this thing that Benton knows for a fact is going to break in 3 days. Fast forward to 3 days later, the panic, and Benton just standing there saying, "Yeah, does anybody remember 3 days ago?" No, they don't. 3 days ago never happened. Right. There's never a mea culpa of, wow, Benton really, maybe he does know something. Absolutely not. This has been my experience in life. Absolutely not. In fact, I've gotten to where if I can't just fix if I don't have the ability to on my own resolve the problem that I can see is going to crop up in the near future, I just leave it alone. I might mention it once and it's like, yeah, I understand. So this is that's not going to happen because why? And see, this is what bothers me is I need to know the why. As soon as I know the why, I'm okay with it. So I might be driven nuts by, the impossibility of me foreseeing well, I do foresee problems systematically, and why is it not possible to fix this now to avoid the panic, right? Because these things always happen, it always goes wrong at the worst possible time. But right now, it's not a panic. Right now, we have plenty of time to address these issues. It's because it doesn't feel like it's going to be a problem. In 3 days, it's going to feel like the exact level of problem that it is, right? Somehow Benton is able to sort of project himself into the future, right? Sort of realize that, oh yeah, there is going to be a panic-stricken state, you know. But that can't be duplicated now, and just how emotionally motivated, what I estimate to be 85% of the populace is that if they don't feel it, they can't do it, right? And I'm sure there's exceptions to that. Again, there are exceptions to everything. Um, but yeah, I find that interesting, certainly. So back to this example of you know of backburnering the state and the governments, and I don't mean state of California, the Benito Mussolini's state, the overarching, just the entire collection of government, corporations, the workers, just all of it, smashed into one thing called the state. The idea that that's going to be sidelined, or destroyed, the destruction of the gears, of Moloch's machine, right? And the speech at the Sproul Hall steps during the free speech movement, which was Democrats. I hate to break it to you folks, in the 60s, that wasn't Republicans starting the free speech movement. And again, I'm not even trying to entertain notions around left, right, and Democrat, Republican. I'm merely pointing out that uh, whatever the parties represent today, that is not you can't trace a straight line backwards into the past, right? It's very the past was very different, and um, especially with the two parties. Um, Although that, well, never mind. Maybe I'll remember. I want to make a point, but I can't make too many points simultaneously, or I won't make any of them. So this idea of the speech at the Sproul Hall steps, Mario Savio talking about basically, this back during the time of all these sit-ins at universities and Kent State and all of this. And it was this idea of if the machinery, if the machine itself, the machinery of the system, the machinery of the university, he's basically talking about that the administration must be, if the administration must understand that if they aren't going to operate the machine in ways that meet specific, criteria of the student body, what Mario Savio was saying is that unless that happens, that the machine must not be allowed to operate at all. And then he gave the example of, even if the people have to place their physical bodies upon the gears, right, to stop it from operating. And this does get into some of the leftist ideologies, right, which is, we're already talking about sort of the inverse of order following, right? There's no order following one's way into come hell or high water, we're going to stop the machinery. We're going to stop the operation of the machinery of the state. That doesn't exist for traditional family values, Christians or MAGA types or mom apple pie and American exceptionalism, Ronald Reagan, all of that. That doesn't exist on that side of the, whatever that spectrum is. There's no such animal. So in that, in a revolution or an uprising, which in setting aside Kaczynskiism for a moment, does the right so-called, and I don't even like the concept of a right and a left, but don't those folks realize that like they would be dependent upon somebody else stopping the machine for them. They would need someone. They would need the left. If for some reason the right wanted to try to replace or change some of these things without actually seizing control of the government. See, that's the thing is, I think that's where you get into the fascism parts of things. The order follower types, the strong authority types, and again, both sides. It's authoritarian. The left wing radicals are also authoritarian. That's what they, Taoism would say. If I go as far as I can from the center, if I go as far left as I can from the center on the one, and I draw a point, and I go as far to the right as I can from center, and I draw a second point, that those are equal. So they're equally authoritarian, right? It's the exact same level of authoritarianism, but in opposite directions. So I'm not calling the right fascists, and then the left loves freedom. I'm not saying that. They're both authoritarians. But the right would, the MAGA types, they're not even going to be able to stop the machine from operating, at least. So the use of the left wing radicals could be, they could be the ones to stop the machine from operating. And again, I'm not calling for any of this. This is all speculation. So, so if it was even possible to sideline the various systems that are running the show and operating the realm, back to what I'm talking about with the competency of the populace, it just doesn't seem like it's doable that they would even be able to, because that's a completely new game of hopscotch or double dutch. So the people who are here, right, who are working a job and they're doing their daily activities, they're serving Moloch's machine, vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions. It's a very specific, hopscotch double dutch, right? They know exactly what to do on each beat, right? So to then attempt to construct a different rhythm, right? A double dutch or hopscotch, or what hopscotch, I guess, is not jumping rope. My bad, but I think you know what I mean. Now we're going to do a new version of double dutch, that the people create, and then now they're going to have to learn a new rhythm, a new rule set, and do this outside of the confines of strong authority. So now they're hesitant, they're fearful. How do they gauge if they're double dutching correctly, right? Can they trust the people who are watching them double dutch to give them accurate feedback on if they're double dutching correctly, right? um, if they're giving the right, call and response. Like, this is what I mean by giving myself credit for being a lay expert in human psychology. I'm able to go through all of this in my mind and recognize, like, yeah, it's just this idea of power to the people. They wouldn't know what to do with it. If you gave the people the power, they would not know what to do with it. They're not capable of wielding that power. I talk about this. I mock the people sometimes when I bring up this 1.15 trillion in interest on the national debt, and I'll sarcastically say, like, might as well give it to the bankers. We wouldn't know what to do with it. I mean, that there is some truth to that. That's the level that the average bozo, myself included to some extent, although, I'm at least capable of showing up and focusing and understanding instructions and performing a task. That's far beyond what a lot of people are just simply not at that level. And I hate to talk about the employment system this way, but this idea of people are talking about, oh, these, jobs, and the jobs don't pay, and you know applying to 700 jobs and not getting a call back or whatever. The reality is the workforce is not just not in good shape with their what they're able to do, their ability to show up on time, to focus for 8 hours, to you see what I mean? Like, part of this is, yes, I have my very strong opinions about the nature of what's happening here, but in a vacuum, if we look at business and, you know, actually what it costs to employ someone, which is far beyond the $20 an hour or whatever the wage is. There's cost to the employer far beyond that. The sad reality is most of these folks aren't really employable. I hate to say it, but if we're talking about to economically and unfortunately, probably okay, here's if we look at the progression of society and the idea of craftspeople and some people are going to be more STEM, right? Science, technology, whatever the fuck that all stands for, engineering, I guess, um, and all of these things, maybe mechanical, I don't know. um, as time has supposedly marched on and as America was being built up, industrially, like the Industrial Revolution and all of these things. So there was skilled craftspeople, right? There was skilled blue collar workers, white collar workers of skill. So it seems to me at a certain point when society, when the actual infrastructure is built up to a certain point and the systems like, you know, public schools are built up to a certain point, all of these, because this is all relatively new, folks. This is not that old, 150 years. Like what is it, 200 years? Is 1820? None of this was here. There wasn't, now there were schools, right? But there wasn't this public school system all across the United States, right? With this, similar curriculums and all of this. And, this like each state sort of having its own, university system or multiple university systems. This is, that only even began in the mid 1800s, as far as that started in the mid 1800s. Um, I don't think it existed at all prior to probably 1840, just going from memory. So yeah, this is less than 200 years. A lot of this phenomena. So the point I'm trying to make is, the divergence. It seems to me like there would have been a divergence where this, there's not going to be stagnation in the skills, right? At a certain point, once society and the infrastructure and industrialism and all of this is built up to a certain point, the skills are going to need to increase, right? The people are going to need to become more and more educated, more and more skilled, right? And I mean actual education in that able to do shit, not going to, I don't mean going to school and getting, because as we see, many of the useless people have fucking, some of them have doctorates. I mean, for real. Doctor useless. Okay. I mean, like for real. Can't do anything. And when people want to poke fun at, Beetlejuice in Chicago or this Karen Baths in LA, and yeah, they are a laughing stock, but Kamala Harris or whoever, almost all of those people have like very, very high levels of university education, like masters at a minimum. A lot of them have doctorates. A lot of them been to law school. Um, it's crazy. So that's not even what I mean by skilled. So when we talk about the dumbing down of society, really the divergence would be, was the system, and so what benefited the system at that divergence point, to where sort of the individuals that comprise society are going to take off and go to another level in a way, right? As far as their own levels of education, as far as capability, right? Their own competencies, their own abilities to think for themselves. That doesn't sound like it would suit the system. Now, some of that was necessary, right? In order to physically manpower up the infrastructure of the system, there was a skilling up, right? So eventually it got to the point where it no longer served the system to continue to skill up the masses. That seems to be perhaps when things took a turn into, okay, well, actually, stagnation's not going to be possible. So it's a by default dumbing down of the populace at that point. It's sort of like there's really nothing else that can be done with them except to dumb them down. And then, oh, surprise, surprise, we have, it's already been years of radio and then now years of television. And oh, surprise, surprise, here's the internet and the smart, and then not that long after the internet, oh, here comes the smartphone. Because my contention was just all of America was just never going to get onto the internet until now. Yeah, they would, for school or for their job, but I mean, as far as being on it hours a day, every day, that was never going to happen without the smartphone. Just it was just there was too much of a computer nerd, um, you know, association with using a desktop or a laptop to get on the internet. It just was never going to be cool enough, right? Versus the handset. Now everybody's got their handset and have for many years. So that does at least seem to account for the dumbing down, at least partially. It's always multi-layered and multifaceted, as the royal we know, right? And there's no fixes for any of this. I think this is what's important. Actually, I've been talking for probably 45 minutes or however long it's been. I've been talking for probably close to 30 minutes now or 20 minutes about how, if the people sidelined the machinery of the system, that it doesn't appear to me like the people would be capable of putting anything competent in its place. So actually, it seems to me like the people, right, are relegated, which is one of my favorite words. The masses in America are actually relegated to the current conditions because the condition of the masses is such that it doesn't seem to me like they would be able to come up with something that wouldn't be more harmful to the people than what exists. And that does probably seem to be some standard that the system itself is aware of and make sure that it always is at a minimum, it has to be probably above what the people could just sort of hodgepodge coddle together in the moment, right? It has to at least, so as dysfunctional as the system is, and as much incompetence and just corruption, because remember, all of that's going to be present in whatever if the masses were to sideline the present machinery and replace it with new machinery. I think the assumption is that whatever replaces the current machinery will then, of course, be without corruption, perfectly operating flawlessly, you know, uh, 100% good, 0% evil. It's like, absolutely not. The system is comprised of people. The corruption is present from the first moment of operation because there's people involved, right? Incompetency is involved from the first moment because there's people involved, right? An imperfect design is involved from day one because people are involved. Okay. And I'm not, it's not the opposite of up with people here, right? Again, I'm very optimistic. I'm very, I'm excited and optimistic by what? The transcendent potential of the individual or an individual is. When we lump those individuals together, I become extremely pessimistic because old Benton here is set up for real world effectiveness, right? Effectiveness is extremely important. In fact, in many ways, it's the most important thing to me. Again, show me a human, I'll show you a hypocrite. There's always exceptions to everything. There's many, many, many examples, innumerable examples of me behaving in ineffective ways or less effective than otherwise could be ways, of course. But put my effectiveness up against your random average bozo. I like my chances. Undiagnosed fake autism has its privileges, or it can. Um, So in a way, I would say that the people are stuck with the present machinery because the people have, unless the individuals that comprise the masses go within their spheres of influence, right? Internalize instead of externalize, which we know is not going to happen. Bring themselves up, raise themselves up, mind, body, and spirit, right? And then there will be enough individuals who can coalesce and comprise a mass or collection of masses right? Collectives and groups that would then have the ability to maybe outperform the present system. So as long as the people can't even outperform the present dysfunctional system, there's no hope. You forget about revolution. Why even bother with Kaczynski at that point? It's like, yeah, who cares? Uh, you know, Fix the condition of the people first, then we'll worry about Kaczynskiism next. The idea that all revolutions or reformations that originate from within the system will only ever perpetuate and benefit and reinforce the system itself. Um, Theodore John Kaczynski, the Unabomber. Some of his stuff starting to pop back up. People, reviewing some of his writings, I've noticed, as people become more and more desperate. And, economically, it's a slavery. It's economic slavery. Unless a person has, you know, access to resources that they're unlikely to lose, right? Um, because the idea of independent wealth, I'm not sure that really exists, at least not, you know, in just normal regular society, right? There in normal society, there are some people who have gathered enough resources that they have a shot, um, at retaining that. You know, People I would still say, well, if they don't, they may not meet my definition of rich, which is an actual rich person. There's nothing that they must do today, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. There's nothing that they really have to do on a day in, day out basis, right, in order to maintain their present lifestyles. And that's really how to know if one is a slave or not. If one has to go to a place and do a thing, if somebody every day or on a regular basis, if somebody has to work in their business on a regular basis in order to maintain their present lifestyle, that's called a slave. It's just, uh, you know, in, and again, I'm sure slavery wasn't what we were told it was, but even if it was indentured servitude and people contractually sort of sold themselves to a piece of property or, whatever that was, you know, whoever bought their labor contractually, presumably part of the contract was to provide, some version of food and living quarters, right? Or at least, access to the people could grow their own food and have their own animals, right? Probably the slaves themselves or the indentured servants took care of it. But that they were also the labor for building of their own slave quarters, maintaining their own slave quarters, um, you know, perhaps growing their own food. And, I'm thinking more of the sharecropper example, right? Um, and, people want to look at me as if I have, some version of white privilege or whatever. It's like, well, I'm not even really a full white person with my Southern accent, but then, like, look at my state's big music hero, Johnny Cash. Like, his parents were motherfucking sharecroppers. It's like this idea that I'm some kind of landed gentry fucking nobleman because of how pale my skin is. It's like, yo, like, uh, that could have been, that could have been in my fucking heritage somewhere. Maybe it is. I don't know. But a lot of people will just assume, oh well, Benton, would have been the slave masters. Like, what are you talking about? My, where I'm from, the fucking Dust Bowl white people. They start starving to death. They take their happy ass to California, and if somebody will let them pick a field, they pick a field, right? That's my people to some extent, out in the fucking cotton fields. At least culturally and what the people are like where I'm from. Um, when I stoop down to pick something up off the ground, it's like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I have it in me to go out there and pick, cabbage all day or whatever, but I bet I could do it for the first day. I might need the next day off, but I bet I could do it every other day to start, right? And I bet I would work my endurance up pretty quick. And that's another, I'm not that worried. See, this idea that, and it's a possibility the government may very well force these homeless people to work. I'm not even kidding. There does seem to be some writing on the wall, uh, or just people in general who just don't work, who figured out a way to avoid employment. There's a bunch of those who live indoors, and the government does seem to be in the process of at least beginning to address some of that. And look, I'm not for it or against it necessarily. My thing is, hey, if we're going to give all this money to if the government's going to give all this money to banks and corporations, then yeah, why shouldn't somebody get a government check? Why shouldn't a human being get a piece of the pie, right? As soon as they cut off the bankers from the free money, and then my argument goes out the window, right? My thing is like, yeah, as long as the people are giving all this money to these rich people, I mean, it's hard to justify taking it away from the poor folks. Um, Certainly. Kind of forgot what I was on about, but surely it's apropos of something, right? Oh, employment. And so sadly, there there is some version of, yes, of course, the capitalist system is greedy and the businesses are greedy, and they're only interested in never-ending maximum profits. These corporations, they they really would rather just not operate than operate at anything below record price. Like, that's a real thing. I don't think a lot of people realize that about capitalism and corporations and all. And it's not again, not a communist versus capitalism thing. I just mean in the American system, um, it's not about having a business. Once the business grows to a certain level, it's not about you know competing, growing market share, and once a certain level is reached, it's all about maximum profits, maximum bonuses for the executives. Maximum dividends for the shareholders, maximum stock prices, maximum earnings, right? Maximum quarterly fucking earnings and sales and revenue and profits. And that's all that matters, folks. Nothing else matters. And I'm here to tell you, the people at the top of those worlds, right? The administrators, the people that operate within those systems, they're not going to waste their time with anything short of record profits. There's nothing in it for them. Because remember, when I talk about wealthy folks, and some of these people are on their way to becoming actual wealthy folks, a wealthy person doesn't know who the fuck they are if their wealth is not increasing in every new moment. That it's an existential crisis, that they become fearful that maybe they weren't ever maybe they never were rich. If their wealth can stagnate or go backwards, well, maybe they never were wealthy, right? And for us, we're the types, as the masses, we're like, oh, a fraction of that wealth would be enough for me, and these billionaires and all of this. Well, yeah, clearly it's not enough for them. It's never enough. There's no such thing as enough to them. It has to be more, 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 more. So sort of back to that divergence I talked about with you know people skilling up and becoming more competent over time, because that's what the system needed, and then the divergence when it went into the dumbing down, right? Well, there's no divergence where the person says, okay, well, the person who has that desire to become wealthy, they never break from that and say, okay, well, now I'm good with my amount of money and I'm just going to go kick it. See, that's what we would do, and that's why we don't ever get rich. Now, I'm not saying we should ever get rich. I'm saying it's a mistake to project that thought process onto people who are obsessed with becoming wealthier monetarily in each new moment. We're not like them. They're not like us. Okay. And it's this idea of people that watch Boss Man Jack. If y'all have ever seen this guy gambling on the internet, and he went from just a few $1,000s to like 100 G's, and everybody's like, cash out, cash out, cash out. They don't realize he'll never cash out. He will go broke 100% of the time because the person who would cash out will never make it to $100,000. See, that type of person will never go gamble. They'll have $20, they'll run it up to 100, they'll stop because they're reasonable, right? They'll never continue gambling and then wow, they've won 1,000, and then okay, well, I should stop now, and this is enough money for me. Oh well, maybe I'll just press my luck. Oh look, $10,000. Well, maybe I should stop now. Okay, I'll press my luck. Oh, look, $20,000, $50,000, 100. That's a specific type of person that does that, right? So it's hilarious to watch normies project their own thought process onto a boss man Jack. It's like, yo, he's not like y'all, right? He couldn't stop if you gave him $100,000. You could go to Boss Man Jack, right, and say, hey man, if you cash out that 100 G's and you don't gamble and you still have that 100 grand in a month, I'm gonna give you this 100 grand. The only way Boss Man Jack's got 100 grand 30 days later is if he's got 1 million because he just didn't lose for 30 days, or he's already lost 100 grand and then he just happens to have won another 100 G's when you show up to give him his bonus, right? It ain't up to him. He doesn't have control of that, right? Same thing with these rich folks. That they don't. It's a characteristic of that's who they are, right? They don't have it in them to do anything else. That's why that's part of why things are able to be the way they are, because there's enough beings being passed off as human. Maybe they're not, maybe they are, I don't know. But there's enough of these beings who are at least being passed off as human. Uh, and I hate to break it to you, who's keeping the economy going? This idea that America's a consumer economy, and America depends on consumption. Well, it's not the poor folks. It's the rich folks. Now, it's not all just the actual rich folks. Some of it is the so-called middle class, which I've termed, poor people, people living in poverty who are temporarily experiencing relative affluence. But the thing about experiencing relative affluence is while they're experiencing relative affluence, we'll build a time machine. We'll go back to the 1980s when was, I was born into poverty. My father was born into poverty, right? However, my father was temporarily experiencing relative affluence. His parents were temporarily experiencing relative affluence for most of his life, right? Although not all of their lives, interestingly. So my father was born into as the youngest child and sort of a surprise baby. I think his dad was like 45 or whatever when my dad was born. I'm not sure of the exact math, but in his 40s. His dad and mom the same age. So they were they were living in a big house and all of this and had Benton Oil Company by then. So my father born into relative affluence in the poorest region of the country, lest we forget, right? Uh, there's always that. So he lived his life under relative affluence. Then he got his degree. His dad set him up in business, right? Nepotism, Nepo baby, right? And then my father lived a life of relative affluence up until you know now he's living in poverty, right? So back to the point I'm making, while my father was experiencing relative affluence, there were many times that he went to a Volvo dealership and paid cash money for a car, and he did this many times over many years. He was probably their best customer, the local Volvo dealer, because it's actually, we didn't have one in my town, Little Rock. So much so that when he needed a job years later, hilariously, they let him come try to sell cars there, which my father's no salesman, which is fine. I'm not either, but not everybody can sell. Um, Although if he'd started younger in his life, he probably would have been good at it. I would assume. But either way, Um, that's the drive. That's what drives the economy. Sadly, in the short run, is the people who do have the money buying shit, right? And what we've seen is that the economy, meaning what people buy, what people spend their money on, how much they earn, all of that. Um, you know, that has shifted. It was already shifting before the pandemic to serving more of the upscale, luxury, higher ticket crowd, right? And some of that is like, if you look at Europe, if you look at America in some ways culturally as like a barbaric sort of backwards version of Europe, Europe a little more refined, a little more cultured, arguably. And again, there's no reason to find the examples to the contrary. There's plenty of examples to the contrary. I'm just saying, generally speaking, right, that there's more of an upper crust, well-to-do, cultured and refined and sophisticated. So that's seems to me that's been cultivated a little more here in the States. Classy people with money who want to spend their money, right? Um, and that is the driver economically in a lot of ways, along with the hocus pocus that the Federal Reserve and the government is doing. Um, yeah. So, under this poppycock notion of the wealth inequality, as if there was a way to measure the gap between the rich and the poor. But I hate to break it to you folks, the economy doesn't give a flying fuck about the poor folks or the underclass or the masses. So if a person isn't rich or has a lot of disposable income, right? Again, a person who has to go to their job, they have to go to their business, but they have high incomes. If they go to their job every day, if they work in their business every day, until something unforeseen or until something happens or something changes, they have a lot of disposable income. That's who the economy's for, folks. It's not to provide the American dream to people who are from here, right? And if we sat Americans down, again, the royal we, if Americans were, and my autism will show a little bit here because clearly this is not practical, but if somebody just sat me down at a young age and said, hey, man, there's no such thing as middle class. You were born into poverty. Your family's temporarily experiencing relative affluence. Probably your dad would, if you get your head out of your ass and learn how to run a business, your dad will probably, help you get started, right? Go to it because, hey, man, I hate to break it to you, but you're going to be sleeping in a car in LA, not knowing where your next meal's coming from by age 50, unless you get as rich as possible now, right? If somebody told me all of that, see, I just assumed there was this thing called an American dream, which is not even what we think it's supposed to be. But, it was this notion of, oh, I'm capable, I'm willing to work, right? Uh, People back then, like, the weirdness, I guess, society was in a state where I was tolerable to be around in the workplace, right? I was generally popular in the workplace, typically, historically. And, it just seemed to me like as long as I was willing to get out of bed every morning and go to a workplace, it was pretty much a guarantee that I would be able to live indoors and eat food, right? Have my play with my computers and do whatever I was going to do. Well, that's over, folks. Now, it doesn't mean it won't come back, right? But that shit's over with because now people see, oh, wow, we really were fucking born into poverty and we were poor all along. We were sold a bill of goods because why? Because to to buy that bill of goods, to be sold that bill of goods, is what the system needed to have happen. That's what the system needed to have happen. You can all roads lead back to, at that point in time, what did the system need? Not what did the people need. So all of this, videos hitting my feed where Gen Z's, TikTok, making TikTok videos confused about how are we expected to go to these bullshit jobs and most of these Gen Z, and I want to really emphasize this point. And a lot of these people are out of college, folks. A lot of Gen Z, the full-time jobs that they are able to get after taxes, their paycheck is enough to pay for their place of that where they live. That's it. It pays their rent and their utilities and nothing else. Now, yeah, there's exceptions. I'm speaking generally, broadly, right? Broadly speaking, that's the reality. So, a 20, somebody out of college, right, who has the option of staying with mommy and daddy, maybe they stayed with mommy and daddy during college, who knows? And now they are working a job, and as dumb as some of these people are, they see, okay, wow, if I want to move into an apartment, it's all my money, right? And that's assuming they have money saved for security deposit, first month's rent, last month's rent. Guess what? These Most of these apartments, you have to show them that you triple the rent or they won't rent to you, right? So in fact, Gen Z doesn't even qualify for a lot of these apartments. So we already see, pretty quickly the individual has to go into making a high income as quickly as possible. When I was coming out of college, although I didn't finish, but that would have been, let's say, 97, 98. That wasn't some kick ass economy, right? This idea that, oh, it was just awesome. And, every boomer was a homeowner and all of this. And, this idea that Gen Z and the millennials have, that just boomers had it made on Easy Street. That's not the case, right? You still have this typical American thing of living well beyond one's means. And, so the Gen Z and some of the millennials assume, oh, well, the boomers, they've all got it made. They're retiring. They're going to have their elderly years. Absolutely not. Most of those folks are struggling. Now, yeah, a lot of them are going to be able to retire. A lot of them are going to have to work uh, a side gig, a side hustle, or work at Home Depot. If you call that retired, it's like, yeah, they retired from school teaching or whatever, and now they work at Home Depot, whatever that is. But, like, so let's say 1998, well, even before that, because, I started renting my own apartments before that. I lived in the college dorm my first year, and then after that, it was renting apartments. Although I had three roommates. So my first apartment ever was me and three roommates, 4 bedroom, 2 bathroom apartment. Um, and then, uh, pretty soon I was working wherever I was working, making $8 an hour, had a 2 bedroom. I think I still shared a bathroom, can't really remember. And, I made somewhere around $8 an hour. My friend that I went to college with made about $8 an hour. And that was enough for us to split the bills in it was a decent apartment, but nothing great, in Fayetteville, Arkansas. And I could go out to Wendy's every day and have my combo meal, because I was very unhealthy back then, and I could go to Walmart. I couldn't just buy whatever I wanted, but, I could buy groceries, right? I could put gas in my car, you know, um, I had enough money to go to the movies. I had enough money. I had girlfriends and whatever. I could go out on a date with my girlfriend, right? But beyond that, there really wasn't any money. Okay, and it wasn't this golden age of consuming like we have now. And I like to give the famous example of, I have $10 wireless earbuds. They work great. It's fantastic. Uh, if you take $10 in today's money, you convert that to whatever $10 was in 1995. You can't buy anything. Let's call it $5. There was nothing purchasable in 1995 for electronics or listening to music, right? You could maybe buy a single, Maybe. Like, I mean, like a 45 record or a single cassette with just, one hit song on one side and then the proverbial B side. Maybe, maybe not. I don't remember, but there was certainly was no electronics purchasable back then that to just wander around town listening to. And folks forget this. And so every time people romanticize the past, they forget all the stuff that sucked. Right. So yeah, I mean, it was, if you think it's just somehow amazing to work 40 hours a week in a low level, bullshit entry level retail job for back then $8 an hour. So today, those a lot of those bullshit jobs pay $16 an hour or whatever or more. The difference now is a person can't just go get a roommate, rent a new apartment because it was brand new. The building was brand new. It wasn't that the construction wasn't that great, but it's move into a new apartment with a roommate that they know they get along with. That's really the key to roommates is once if there's a reliable person that a one is able to get along with and knows they can get along with that person and knows that person will just be like, hey man, you're doing this thing and it's driving me fucking crazy. How about you knock it the fuck off? As long as that's a two-way street, right? And it's like, oh, my bad, I'll knock it the fuck off. Sorry, you know. Oh, don't no apology necessary. Just don't ever do that again, type shit. And but being able to communicate that, and um, so that's not possible anymore. That's over, right? Well, does that mean 1998 was just the height of humanity? I'd say no, it doesn't. You know, that doesn't sound like my dream life. That's a fallback. What that means is unless I was ill, unless some sort of calamity befell me, and a car accident, or as long as I had the money as long as I had access to fixing my car if it broke down, right? Because it's not like I had any sort of savings to fix the car. It's probably mommy and daddy. Hey, could y'all help me out? So I think thankfully I'll just always manage to drive reliable vehicles somehow. But um, I think y'all understand where I'm taking this. So I've been listening to a channel, and I think at least one of the videos is on my post tab about economics. So they've taken to measuring. So they're actually measuring not in money so much anymore. It seems like a little easier way to get a hold on inflation is to say, okay, in the past, how many hours did a person have to work to buy, like, say, one share of the S&P 500 or the Nasdaq or whatever. And again, I'm coming from memory, so this won't be strictly accurate. But so they're saying, well, yeah, 1980, whatever, or whenever in the old times, a person had to work 19 hours to buy one share of the S&P 500. And then they're like, today a person has to work but at a certain wage, like maybe the minimum wage, right? Or maybe at the median wage, whatever they set as the key, right? It might have been median hourly wage, right? Um, so whatever, it's 19 hours at the median wage back in the day to buy one share of the stock market or whatever, an index fund, I guess you call that. S&P 500. And today that's like 190, right? So 10 times increase. Well, I know everything I need to know now. It's like, okay, well, I had my chance to get rich. I didn't give a fuck about getting rich because I don't care about getting rich. And I didn't have the vision to see, oh, in the future, I don't need to get rich to have things. I need to get rich in case shit goes south, right? And then I would have, you know, gotten my act together by my 30s, by my late 20s, early 30s, enough to then from 30 to 45 probably get rich enough to, watch the clown show or whatever. Yeah, nobody told me. So back to how I started this whole jag or diatribe, if we actually sat people down and just explained it to them, what exactly where they are in the hierarchy. It's like more or less like, yeah, you're an indentured servant, not you, the listener, but the person like entering the workforce. It's like, yeah, the system is giving you all this propaganda because of advertising and marketing. It's blown sunshine up your ass. There's been the self-esteem movement. Everybody's thinks their shit doesn't stink. But then now and this is part of the hell of this place, the hell, right? This sounds like hell to me, to be raised up, to be sacrificed to a pagan deity known as Moloch right out of the gate as a baby, and then to be indoctrinated and raised up in a system. Uh, oh, we'll go to college and you're guaranteed a fucking high paying job and all of this. And this again, the self-esteem movement, um, you know, the no bullying and all of that. And then to insert those people into indentured servitude, de facto wage slaving, right? Well, of course it's jarring to them. Of course they're not necessarily handling it well. Now, some of them are, again, number one feature of the human is adaptation to environment. Some of them are immediately realizing, and then also the youth with the technology, there's way more sophisticated means for them to communicate with each other, and to have some sort of network of people saying, no, man, that university's a dead end. Don't even bother. Like, we're all going around this other way and developing these other skills, and a lot of which is, working with AI and all of this stuff. And they're finding their way around. And a lot of that is through networking. It's through connections, which some would say that is the purpose of college, is to go there to develop the connections, which is I had the opportunity to do, right? Except I had no fucking idea, because I wasn't attracted to do it. I was going based on what I was attracted to. Meanwhile, the unlocking of the achievement of true knowledge of self. Like, actually, I'm pretty sure I'm on the path I'm supposed to be on. I'm pretty sure, right? If you want to talk about fate or destiny, like, I wasn't supposed to end up getting the sit down to get rich in the first place. That's what it would have taken. Somebody would have had to just explain all of this to me, and I would have understood on some level. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, okay. And I'm able to delay gratification. I don't need to feel some type of way to go out and get rich, pragmatically, right? Um, and then back to notions around the American dream. See, what people don't realize, here's the American dream. Okay, whether you're born here or you're coming here from another country, here's the American dream. It's to start with a person living in poverty, a person who hates living in poverty, right? A person who is willing to do almost anything to earn the opportunity to maybe, perhaps one day escape the crushing poverty that they've lived under for however long, right? Oh, okay. You're either born into that in America, right? And the American dream is some business, right? Or business opportunity will present itself, and the American dream is achieved by working one's fingers to the bone indefinitely in the enrichment, at least in the short term, of others, right, who are probably already wealthy, right? Now, the more risk-taking side of this would just be go into some version of like a very low-level business and then building it up over time. Although at some point, to become successful in business, they're going to end up into this regular system that I'm talking about, where they're going to be sort of beholden to the people who are higher up. Again, connections, right? Who can they make friends with? Who can they help out? You know, who can they get in good with, right? And so it's people who will leap at the opportunity to take what an American will view as a raw deal, right? That's the American dream. So one of my favorite movies, gangs of New York on the out there at the docks when the Irish are coming in, the potato famine, they're coming in just boat after boat, wave after wave, and it's the Tammany Hall guy, and he's out there, giving them, he's out there greeting them and telling them who to vote for, right, and giving them, I don't know, some kind of small gift of appreciation, whatever it was. I don't remember. He's handing something out. Vote Tammany, right? Tammany Hall. And then there's Bill the Butcher, just talking about the mongrel Irish hordes, and he's talking about the Irish are here, uh, and they'll do for a nickel what a black man would do for a dime, and a white man used to get a quarter for, right? That's the American dream, folks. That's the American dream, is to be willing to show up and, you know, first it was the white man working his fingers to the bone. He was getting a quarter. Then the black man was working his fingers to the bone, but slavery slash indentured servitude. And then they fled to the north or whatever. And now they're getting a dime, but also very racist, lest we forget. New York City, very, very racist at the time of that movie. The movie was set. I won't even get into the draft riots and what happened during the draft riots. Well, blacks were attacked in the streets. Of course they were. And, some of them were strung up in New York City. Right. Oh, but it's only the South where the racism was. Okay, sure. Sure. Anyway, it's a little disturbing imagery there. But well, and again, I don't know what happened in history. That's the official fiction. So, and now here's so business becomes wealthier, right? Business grows, business becomes ever more profitable. Part of this never ending series of record profits, part of this rich people getting richer every new moment into perpetuity. Somebody has got to show up who's willing to work for a nickel. When the past wage was a dime, because the reason why the wage got down to a dime was because somebody showed up who because the people who were there before weren't working for less than a quarter. So a lot of this is now being done through the sophisticated and confusing finance and economic systems, right? Because what they do is, you know, we can't, the wages are too confusing, because when Bill was talking about the quarter, the dime, and the nickel, that was the present version of a quarter, a dime, and a nickel. See, we've even, because of inflation and monetary policy, we can't even properly relate to the amounts of money anymore. And you see this so as much as I talk about adaptation to environment as the number one feature of the human, well, yes and no, or maybe both, because what I see is the boomers, like, they still think $50,000 a year is like a lot of money. Like, no, it's not. That's not a lot of money. It was. It's not now. And it never was really a lot. What they mean by a lot of money means if a person's frugal and they're not foolish with their money, right? Historically 50 grand would be enough to potentially be a homeowner, but to rent a nice place to live, right? Have a decent vehicle, have plenty of money to feed oneself, save for retirement if one is into that, right? It's not enough money to do that anymore. It's just simply not. So you got the older folks, my age and up, who are having trouble relating to the environment that the person leaving college is escaping into, right? Or they're being dropped into this system and being offered, if they can find a job, it's wages and jobs, but they can't, there's no possibility of doing all of the things that I just mentioned. But because when the boomer was that age, 50 G's was more than enough money to do all that, right? And then, the idea of six figures, you know, people still say six figures as if it's like, no, you better tell me which digit. What do you mean six figures? Are you talking $101,000? I'm here to tell you that's not a great income anymore. That's an okay income, right? Wasn't that long ago, shit, that'd been people, a lot of people would be tickled pink to be making six figures. Six figures, I, you know, is there a two? Is there a two? Is the first number a two or a three? Because if not, I don't think the one's getting it done. And now I'm going to need to know all the rest of the other 175, okay. 112, I don't know. And people just simply, I don't know if it's their brains are hardened too much. I don't know what it is, but people are having a lot of trouble reframing. I see it all the time, and just the confusion of the older folks, of well, why can't they pay their bills? Why are they struggling? And well, it's always brought back to, well, they must be living beyond their means. It's like, no, you live beyond your means. What are you talking about? And not you, the listener. The boomers live beyond their means. I was reading articles in the 90s, by the early 2000s, talking about how the average American spends $1.04 for every $1 that they earn. And that was in like 2000, or early 2000s. So, imagine what that is now, right? So it's not like boomers live below their means. They didn't. A lot of them lived check to check, or um, whatever they made was whatever they spent. America's been like that for a long time. So the American dream is almost always based on immigration. It's it's a never-ending cycle. Here's what the American dream is. It's a never-ending cycle of the purpose of the American dream is to locate, right? It's to find and hire the people who will do the most for the least. That's the American dream. And that's what one of the major ways by which business has, rich people have been made rich and richer historically. And, slavery, economic slavery. And so now we see yes, there are boom cycles, there's bust cycles that, the tide comes in, the tide goes out, right? So yeah, there was economic times when I could just work 40 hours and easily get hired, right? And the idea of, if I don't like how they're talking to me on this job, I can just literally walk across the street and they'll hire me. It's like, yeah, but part of that was because I was in an entry level job working retail. Yeah, I walked from one gas station and across the street is, I don't know, whatever, a burger joint, right? I mean, it wasn't as if, I was in a corporation somewhere and walked across the street to the other corporation and they hired me. I wouldn't even be able to get in, wouldn't be able to get in the front door. The fact that, the fact that they talk about going across the street and, hang on, I do need to peek and make sure I'm still good with where I'm parked. Hang on, peek out the window, see what's going on. I might be in the wrong place. I don't know. Let me see. Hang on. BRB. We're bringing you with me. Oh no, I'm good. I know who that is behind me. It's actually a local, let's say, an immigrant who is, a street vendor. He's got a trailer. So this guy came here from Guatemala. I guess he's in his late 20s, early 30s, and not my business how he got here. And I'm one of those. I've always been that way. It's not really any of my business. He's here now, and I've never been xenophobic. Hmm, it's just not in my nature. So, or maybe I was brainwashed by the Jehovah's Witnesses not to be xenophobic. Am I buying things? Why am I buying things? Hang on. Oh, thank you. We got a donation to the StreamYard Fund. Much appreciated. Thank you for the donation. Let me check the batteries here, make sure we're still good on our battery levels. Yeah, we're good. Um, kind of forgot where I was in the Discord. Oh, the Guatemalan guy. And maybe his family saved up money. I have no idea where he gets his money from. I don't fucking know. Maybe he got a small bit. Maybe he got an SBA loan. I don't fucking know. But he's got this nice trailer. Sells nice quality. Coffee and the guy works 7 days a week. Of course, see, this is the American dream. His life is work. This is all he does. It's all the guy does. And well, somebody of course stole his pickup truck a couple of weeks back. So now he's got a rental. I don't know what he pays. I guess he probably rents it by the month. Um, but this is a person who, you can't get him down, right? You can't, uh, he's going to continue to work and strive and struggle, and probably because of, where he grew up and it's that desire, right? It's that just, there's something in him that he wants more materially, right? A different life, right? Different, social group. Just and that requires coming to a place like America and, you know, getting his little piece of the American dream, right? Um, well, that ain't me. That was never me. I'm not. I don't have those motivations, you know. Um, so I guess in a lot of ways, the American dream is simply not for me. Now, when I didn't know any better, I certainly gave a lot of my labor away at discounted prices. When I certainly could have been earning more, right? Um, but yeah, yep. So I kind of forgot where I was at before I panicked, and I didn't really panic, but where I reminded myself to look out the window. I guess it's time to wrap up, though. I don't want to waste too much more of the free 20 hours. Anyway, hopefully I made all my points. Thanks for watching. Bye.